The silver moons of Verdania cast their ethereal glow through the crystal caves. As Zara Nightshade finally allowed her shoulders to drop from their battle-ready stance, 7 rotations she had been tracking the void serpents through the nebula. Storm's 7 rotations away from the only beings in the universe who truly mattered to her. Her iridescent skin, normally a soft pearl white, pulsed with the deep violet patterns that marked her species' exhaustion. But beneath the fatigue lay something stronger, the fierce joy of a mother. Returning home. The winding path to her hidden sanctuary carved through luminescent rock formations that sang in harmony with Verdania's magnetic fields. Zara's acute senses picked up the familiar resonance of her dwelling's energy barriers, the melodic trickle of the underground spring that fed her gardens, and something that made every protective instinct flare to life, soft murmuring, not the crystalline tones of her own people, but something warmer, more melodious, human voices, interwoven with the delighted trills of her beloved cubs. Zara's twin heart organs that pulsed in rhythm with her homeworld's aurora cycles seemed to skip their ancient pattern. She abandoned her travel pack and moved with the fluid grace of her warrior lineage, muscle memory guiding her through the crystal formations even as maternal panic threatened to overwhelm her carefully maintained composure. Had scouts discovered her refuge? Were Kira and Nyx in danger? The scene that greeted her at the cavern's main chamber would etch itself into her memory. Like acid on metal. Her cubs, her precious, irreplaceable twins, were curled up beside a human male, completely absorbed in what appeared to be an impromptu astronomy lesson. The stranger was tall and graceful, with warm bronze skin and eyes the color of Verdania's summer storms. His dark hair held streaks of silver that caught the moonlight filtering through the crystal ceiling, and his clothing bore the practical elegance of someone accustomed to both civilized society and wilderness survival. Little Nyx had positioned herself directly against the human side, her opalescent form shifting through the color spectrum that indicated complete trust and contentment. Kira, always the bold explorer, had claimed his lap as her personal throne, her tiny hands tracing constellation patterns on his arm, while he patiently identified each star system. And that cluster there, the human was saying, his voice carrying an educator's passion mixed with genuine affection. That's the singing gardens of Altair. The inhabitants there grow cities from living crystal, much like your mama's people do. Impossibly. He was speaking in perfect Etherian dialect, not the clumsy approximation most universal translators produced, but the nuanced, emotional language of her species. More than that, he understood the cultural references, the way her people viewed the universe through both scientific and spiritual lenses. Do they have cubs like us? Nyx asked, her voice heavy with the drowsiness that came just before her evening rest cycle. Every species has young ones they treasure, the human replied, and something in his tone suggested personal experience with loss and longing. Though I think your mama would agree that none are quite as special as you two. Zara found herself frozen between the urge to protect and an inexplicable sense of rightness. Her cubs, raised to be cautious around strangers, to understand that their crystalline heritage made them valuable to the wrong people, were treating this outsider with the comfortable familiarity usually reserved for family. More unsettling was the way he responded, not with the calculating interest of a collector, or the nervous fear most beings showed around her species, but with genuine warmth. The humans seemed to sense her presence before either cub noticed her return. He looked up slowly, following some instinct, and their gazes locked across the chamber. For a moment that stretched like the space between stars, neither moved. Zara saw recognition flicker in his storm-gray eyes, not just of her species, but of her specifically. It was followed not by fear or ambition, but by something that looked remarkably like relief. "You're earlier than they expected," he said quietly, his voice designed not to disturb the cub's peaceful state. "I'm Orion Blackwood. I had some trouble with my ship 3 cycles ago. Your children found me in the outer caverns. 3 cycles, in the span of her absence." This human had somehow woven himself so completely into her cub's routine that they spoke of star systems and crystal cities with the ease of familiar bedtime stories. Zara's protective programming warred with a growing curiosity about the being who had earned such instant, complete trust from her naturally cautious offspring. They saved my life, Orion continued, shifting carefully so as not to disturb Kira's comfortable position. Navigation failure in the storm belt, my ship's completely dead, and I was badly hypothermic when they found me. He gestured toward a corner of the chamber where emergency medical supplies were neatly arranged, alongside what looked like sophisticated but damaged communication equipment. They've been extraordinary hosts, as if responding to their names in the adult conversation. Both cubs stirred, becoming aware of their mother's presence. But instead of the exclusive reunion dance that typically followed her return from dangerous missions, they seemed determined to bridge two worlds. "Mama," Kira sang out, launching herself from Orion's lap in a graceful arc that ended in Zara's arms. Orion knows everything about the singing crystals, and he can make light paintings in the air with his hands, and he tells stories about floating cities and time rivers, and he makes the most wonderful tea from the silver leaf plants. Nyx added, patting over with the measured dignity she affected when trying to seem mature. "Better than yours, even, despite everything, the questions, the concern, the complete upheaval of her carefully ordered world." Zara felt her mouth curve into an involuntary smile. Trust her cubs to find the one detail guaranteed to either endear a stranger to her or earn her eternal rivalry. The universe, it seemed, had decided to test everything she thought she knew about safety, solitude, and the wisdom of keeping her heart guarded against beautiful strangers with storm-colored eyes. Dawn broke over Verdania's crystal peaks in waves of rose and gold, painting the cavern walls with shifting patterns that seemed to dance with life itself. Zara had spent the night in restless contemplation, her usual meditation cycle disrupted by the presence of the human who slept peacefully in her guest alcove, Orion Blackwood. Even his name carried a musical quality that resonated strangely with her crystalline heart chambers. She found him in her garden sanctuary as the morning light filtered through the translucent ceiling, tending to her luminous orchids with the careful attention of someone who understood that each bloom was a small miracle. His damaged ship, she could see now, was indeed beyond repair. Twisted metal and shattered crystal drive cores, scattered across the outer ledge like the remains of a fallen star. "You're up early," Zara observed, settling onto the carved stone bench that overlooked her carefully cultivated paradise. In daylight, she could study him properly. The silver in his hair wasn't premature aging, but natural coloring his species' genetic adaptation to high-radiation environments. His hands, gentle as they were with her plants, bore the calluses of someone accustomed to both delicate work and physical hardship. "Old habits," Orion replied, without looking up from the rare moonbell he was carefully pollinating. "My ship ran on a strict schedule, plus I wanted to check on these beauties before the cubs woke up." Kira mentioned they were your pride and joy. Something warm unfurled in Zara's chest at his consideration. Most beings saw her garden as pretty decoration, never understanding that each plant served multiple purposes: medicine, nutrition, air purification, even emotional therapy for her highly sensitive species. "You know botanical cultivation. It's my profession, actually." He straightened, wiping his hands on a cloth that was already stained with the silver pollen of her rarest specimens. "Xenobotanist for the Independent Research Collective. I was cataloging unique flora in the spiral arm when my navigation computer decided to have a spectacular breakdown." The Independent Research Collective. Zara felt some of her wariness ease. Unlike the corporate expeditions or military scouts that occasionally wandered into this sector, the IRC was known for its ethical approach to xenological research. They studied without exploiting, learned without conquering. "That explains why you're not afraid of us," she said. "Most humans view the Etherian as either exotic curiosities or valuable assets to be acquired." Orion's storm-gray eyes darkened. "Most humans are idiots, with more greed than sense." The vehemence in his voice surprised her. "Your people have contributed more to galactic understanding of biocrystalline matrices than entire universities. The idea of treating you as collectibles rather than colleagues is—" He paused, seeming to search for words strong enough to convey his disgust. "Personal experience?" Zara asked gently, noting the way his jaw tightened. "My research partner was Etherian. Brilliant woman named Celeste. Star Weaver. We were studying symbiotic crystal formations on Kepler-442b. When corporate raiders decided her unique insights would be more profitable in a private laboratory. His hands clenched unconsciously. By the time IRC security responded to our distress call, they'd already taken her. The pain in his voice was unmistakable, and Zara felt an unexpected surge of sympathy. She knew that particular agony, the helpless rage of watching someone you cared about disappear into the galaxy's darker corners. It was why she'd chosen this remote sanctuary, why she'd raised her cubs far from civilization's dangerous attention. "I'm sorry," she said simply. "Did you find her, eventually?" But the neural conditioning they'd subjected her to, Orion's voice trailed off. She wasn't the same person anymore. The Celeste I knew, who laughed at impossible flowers and named every crystal formation like a beloved pet, was gone, replaced by someone who could only think in terms of efficiency and profit margins. The cubs chose that moment to emerge from their sleeping chamber, still drowsy and clingy from the night's rest. Kira immediately attached herself to Zara's side while Nyx, with the single-minded determination of the recently awakened, made directly for Orion. "Did you see Mama singing flowers yet?" Nyx asked, tugging on his sleeve. "They only bloom when they're really happy, and they've been singing extra loud since you got here." Zara followed her daughter's gaze to the cluster of harmony blooms near the cavern's heart. Indeed, the crystalline petals were resonating with an unusually complex melody, the botanical equivalent of purring. The flowers were empathic, responding to the emotional states of those around them. If they were singing more beautifully in Orion's presence, maybe they like having someone who understands plants around, Kira suggested with 6-year-old wisdom. "Mama talks to them, but they probably get lonely for someone who talks back in plant language." Orion laughed, a sound like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "Plant language is mostly very polite small talk. You know, lovely weather we're having. And that's a nice root system you've developed." "Do they gossip?" Nyx asked seriously. "Mama says gossip is how communities stay connected, but it has to be kind gossip, not mean gossip." "Oh, definitely. Flowers are terrible gossips. They spend all day discussing who's attracting the best pollinators and who needs better fertilizer." As the cubs dissolved into giggles at the idea of flowers having social drama, Zara found herself studying Orion with new appreciation. He didn't just tolerate her children's questions. He engaged with them as intellectual equals, never talking down or dismissing their curiosity. More than that, he seemed to genuinely enjoy their company. "Mama," Kira said suddenly, with the intuitive leap that always caught Zara off guard, "Orion's ship is broken, right? So he has to stay here until someone comes to get him. That's complicated, sweetheart," Zara began, realizing she hadn't actually considered the logistics of her unexpected guest's situation. "Actually," Orion interjected carefully, "my emergency beacon was damaged in the crash. The IRC knows my general research area, but this system isn't on any major shipping routes. It could be months before anyone thinks to look for me here." Months. The word hung in the air between them like a question neither was quite ready to ask. Zara felt her heart skip again, though whether from concern or anticipation, she couldn't say. "Good," Nyx declared with the absolute certainty of childhood. "That means you can teach us more about the Star Cities and help Mama with the difficult plants, and maybe learn to understand what the harmony flowers are really saying. If your Mama doesn't mind having a stranded botanist cluttering up her sanctuary," Orion said quietly, his eyes meeting Zara's with an expression she couldn't quite decipher. Zara began, then stopped. Every rational part of her mind cataloged the risks, exposure, complications, the danger of growing attached to someone who would inevitably leave. But looking at her cubs' hopeful faces, at the way the harmony flowers continued their joyous song, at the gentle patience in Orion's storm-colored eyes, "The garden could use someone who speaks proper plant language," she heard herself saying. "And the cubs have apparently decided you're part of the family now." The smile that transformed Orion's features was like sunrise breaking through storm clouds, and Zara felt something dangerous and wonderful bloom in her chest, a feeling as delicate and powerful as the rarest flower in her collection. The universe, it seemed, had a gift for turning survival into something that looked remarkably like destiny. The morning of the 7th rotation dawned with an unusual shimmer. In Verdania's atmosphere, aurora streams dancing through the crystal caverns in patterns that hadn't been seen for generations. Zara woke to find both cubs missing from their usual sleeping spots, though the faint trail of their excited whispers led her toward the garden sanctuary, where Orion had been cataloging her rarer specimens. She found all three of them crouched around something that made her breath catch in her throat. There, nestled between the roots of her ancient silverwood tree, a cluster of starlight mosses had begun to bloom. The tiny organisms pulsed with bioluminescent patterns that seemed to respond to the aurora overhead, creating a light symphony that her people had believed extinct for over a century. "Mama, look," Kira whispered, her voice filled with reverent wonder. "Orion says these are memory mosses. They remember songs from when the first Etherians lived here." Zara knelt beside them, her crystalline skin automatically shifting to match the gentle blue-white glow of the mosses. "That's impossible," she breathed. "The starlight mosses died out when the great exodus happened. I've been tending this grove for 15 years and never seen so much as a spore." "Sometimes," Orion said softly, his fingers hovering just above the luminous clusters, "life waits for the right conditions to reveal itself. The electromagnetic resonance from your people's presence, combined with the aurora activity." He gestured to where the lights overhead seemed to pulse in harmony with the mosses. "It's like they were waiting for home to feel like home again." NYX, ever the practical one despite her young age, tilted her head thoughtfully. "Does that mean there might be other hidden things in the grove? Things waiting for the right time to wake up?" "Only one way to find out," Orion replied with a smile that held just enough mystery to capture both cubs' complete attention, though it might require a bit of exploring in the deeper caverns. The deeper caverns, Zara felt a familiar flutter of protective concern mixed with something else, curiosity. She'd always avoided the lower levels of the cave system, partly from caution and partly because the ancient Etherian script carved into those walls stirred emotions she wasn't ready to examine. But watching her cubs' faces light up with anticipation, seeing the way Orion looked at her with patient understanding rather than pressure. "The lower levels can be dangerous," she said carefully. "The crystal formations are unstable, and some of the passages flood during storm season. What if we just explored a little bit?" Kira pleaded, employing the devastating combination of logic and charm that made her nearly impossible to refuse. "Orion knows about cave systems, and you know every passage in our territory. We'd be super careful. And if we find more sleeping plants, we could help them wake up properly," Nyx added, her voice carrying the earnest determination that indicated she'd already made up her mind about the expedition's necessity. Orion caught Zara's eye over the cubs' heads, and she saw her own internal debate reflected in his expression. The scientist in him was clearly fascinated by the implications of the Starlight Moss's return, but the man who'd spent weeks earning her trust understood her protective instincts. "We don't have to go far," he offered quietly, "just the first level down where the main passages are stable, and only if you're comfortable with it." 3 hours later, they were making their way through crystal corridors that hummed with ancient energy, their path lit by bioluminescent strips that Orion had somehow coaxed into full brilliance. Just by touching them, the cubs bounded ahead, with the fearless enthusiasm of youth, their excited discoveries echoing off the crystalline walls. "Mama, there are pictures here," Kira called from where she'd found a section of wall covered in intricate carvings. "Pictures of Etherians and other people?" Zara approached the ancient artwork with growing amazement. The carvings showed scenes she'd heard only in half-remembered legends: Etherians living alongside humans and other species in what appeared to be a thriving multicultural community. Gardens where crystalline trees grew beside Earth origin oaks. Workshops where different species collaborated on technologies that combined organic and synthetic elements. Families that seemed to transcend the boundaries of biology entirely. "The Harmony colonies," Orion said wonderingly, running his fingers along the carved figures with reverent care. "I thought they were just myths. Stories about pre-diaspora settlements where species integration actually worked. My grandmother used to tell tales about the old communities," Zara admitted, her voice soft with memory. "But I always assumed they were just wishful thinking." Bedtime stories about a galaxy that could have been. Look at this section. Orion pointed to a panel that showed what appeared to be a ceremony taking place in a natural amphitheater. Crystalline beings stood beside humans, their hands joined in patterns that seemed to channel energy between species. It's some kind of bonding ritual, not just diplomatic alliance, but actual energetic connection. NYX, who had been quietly studying the carvings with the intense focus she brought to anything that caught her interest, suddenly tugged on Zara's arm. "Mama, does this look like our garden to you?" Following her daughter's gaze, Zara felt her hearts skip their rhythm entirely. The carved amphitheater was unmistakably familiar, the same crystal formations, the same arrangement of natural stone benches, even the same ancient silverwood tree that now sheltered the newly awakened starlight mosses. Their sanctuary wasn't just a hiding place she'd chosen at random. It was one of the original Harmony colony sites. "We're living in history," she whispered, the implications washing over her like a tide. "Our home was built on a foundation of cooperation, of different species choosing to build something beautiful together. Maybe that's why the mosses woke up," Kira suggested with 6-year-old logic that sometimes cut straight to the heart of complex issues. Maybe the grove was lonely for the old days, and when Orion came, it started remembering how to be happy again. Orion's eyes met Zara's across the ancient artwork, and she saw her own wonder reflected in his storm-gray gaze. But there was something else there too, a warmth that had been growing stronger each day, a connection that seemed to resonate with the same frequency as the awakening flora around them. "The energy patterns," he said slowly, his voice thoughtful. "The way the plants respond when we're all together, it's like the grove recognizes something, some kind of harmonic resonance between our biorhythms. Is that your scientific way of saying we belong together?" Zara asked, surprised by her own boldness. The cubs had wandered deeper into the corridor, their voices echoing as they discovered new wonders, giving the adults a moment of relative privacy. Orion stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his human metabolism, so different from her crystalline energy patterns, yet somehow perfectly complementary. "Maybe," he said softly, "or maybe it's my human way of saying that some connections transcend species, transcend logic, transcend everything we think we know about how the universe works." "And maybe," Zara replied, her crystalline skin shifting to the warm golden hues that indicated deep contentment, "it's my Etherian way of saying that home isn't a place. It's the harmony you create with the people you choose to love." When Kira and Nyx returned from their exploration, chattering excitedly about hidden chambers and sleeping crystal gardens, waiting to be awakened, they found their mother and Orion standing hand in hand before the ancient murals, their combined biorhythms creating patterns of light that danced across the carved scenes of interspecies harmony. The grove's memory had awakened something more precious than extinct mosses. It had reminded them all that love, like life itself, finds a way to bloom in the most unexpected places. The emergency klaxons shattered the peaceful morning like crystal against stone, their harsh mechanical screaming wholly alien to Verdania's natural harmonies. Zara felt the disturbance through every crystalline fiber of her being as military-grade engines carved through the planet's delicate atmospheric layers. With all the subtlety of a plasma torch through silk, she found Orion in the garden, his hands frozen mid-motion over the singing orchids that had closed their petals at the first hint of threat. The cubs pressed close to his sides, their natural bioluminescence flickering between fear and confusion. As the sound of approaching ships grew louder, "Military formation," Zara said grimly, her enhanced hearing picking up the distinctive engine signatures of Etherian strike cruisers, 3 vessels armed for planetary assault. "They're not explorers." Through the crystalline ceiling of their sanctuary, dark shadows began to blot out Verdania's gentle sunlight. The ships descended with mechanical precision, their hulls gleaming like polished obsidian against the planet's rose-gold sky. Zara's skin shifted to the deep purple patterns that indicated battle readiness, ancient warrior protocols awakening. Despite the years she'd spent cultivating peace, "Mama," Nyx whispered, her small voice trembling. "Who are they?" Before Zara could answer, a communication pulse resonated through the cavern walls, the specific frequency used for Etherian. "Military," Transmissions. The message, when it came, struck her like a physical blow. Zara Nightshade. The voice was achingly familiar, carrying the authority of command and the weight of shared history. By order of the Etherian Defense Council, you are required to surrender custody of the protected bloodline offspring and report for immediate disciplinary review. You have one standard R to comply. Orion's arm tightened protectively round the cubs as he looked to Zara for explanation. The golden warmth that had grown between them over the past weeks suddenly felt fragile as spun glass in the face of approaching storm. Protected bloodline, he asked quietly. Zara closed her eyes, feeling the weight of secrets she'd hoped never to reveal. My former mate, Captain Vex Ironhold of the Etherian Defense Force. He's the cub's biological father. The words fell into silence, broken only by the growing rumble of landing ships. Kira and Nyx huddled closer to Orion, their instinctive trust in him warring with the confused loyalty they felt toward their own species. Zara's heart ached as she watched them struggle with concepts too large for their young minds. I'll-effed him 3 years ago, she continued, her voice steady despite the turmoil beneath. Vex believes that our children belong to the state, that their unique genetic heritage makes them too valuable to waste on civilian life. He wants them trained as weapons, not raised as individuals. The first of the landing craft touched down beyond the grove with a thunderous impact that shook dust from the ancient crystal formations. Through her enhanced senses, Zara could detect the deployment of troops, the activation of containment fields, the methodical establishment of a perimeter designed to prevent any possibility of escape. There's something else, she said, her skin flickering with the admission of deeper truth. The cubs aren't just Etherian. They're hybrid offspring, rare beyond measure. Their father's military genetics combined with my botanical neural pathways created something unprecedented. Orion's eyes widened as understanding dawned. That's why they can communicate so easily with the plants, why the grove responds to them so strongly. They're bridges between biological and crystalline consciousness, and that makes them incredibly valuable to those who see children as resources rather than people. Zara finished bitterly. Heavy footsteps approached through the outer passages, the distinctive rhythm of Etherian military boots, accompanied by the hum of powered armor. Zara positioned herself between the sound and her family, her crystalline claws extending to their full lethal length. Captain Vex Ironhold emerged into the garden sanctuary, like a figure from her worst memories made manifest, tall even by Etherian standards. His crystalline form had been augmented with military biotechnology that turned his natural beauty into something sharp-edged and intimidating. His skin held the deep indigo patterns of absolute authority, and his eyes, once warm with shared dreams, now reflected only cold calculation. Behind him came a squad of elite guards, their armor gleaming with the sort of technology that could level cities or capture individuals with surgical precision. Zara, Vex said, his voice carrying the tone of someone accustomed to immediate obedience. You look well. Exile has clearly agreed with you. His gaze moved to assess the cubs with professional interest before settling on Orion with obvious disdain. Though your choice of companions has become questionable, Papa Vex, Kira called out, her young voice bright with recognition despite the tension crackling through the air. She started to move toward him, but Orion's gentle hand on her shoulder kept her close. Hello, little star, Vex replied, his expression softening marginally. You've grown so much. Both of you have. His attention turned to Nyx, who regarded him with the wary intelligence that had always made her seem older than her years. Come, now, children, it's time to come home. Time to learn what you were meant to become. This is home, Nyx said firmly, her small hand finding Orion's. And we're already becoming what we're meant to be. Vex's expression hardened at her defiance. Home is with your own people, child, not hidden away in caves with. His gaze swept over Orion with barely concealed contempt. Exotic specimens. The insult hung in the air like a challenge. Zara felt her warrior training surge forward, ready to meet disrespect with violence. But Orion's response surprised them all. You're absolutely right, he said calmly, stepping forward despite the obvious danger. The children should be with their own people, their family. The ones who love them for who they are, not what they might become. His storm-gray eyes met Vex's crystalline stare without flinching. The question is, which of us actually qualifies? For a moment, Vex seemed taken aback by the human's audacity. Then his expression shifted to something that might have been amusement if it hadn't been so cold. "Fascinating," he said. "The primitive has developed opinions about Etherian family structure. Perhaps you'd like to share your expertise on our reproductive protocols and genetic responsibilities?" "I'd rather share my expertise on what these children need," Orion replied evenly. "Love, safety, the freedom to grow into their own unique potential instead of being molded into weapons." "Weapons?" Vex's voice turned sharp as crystal striking stone. "These children carry the genetic legacy of our most elite bloodlines. They have the potential to bridge biological and crystalline consciousness in ways that could transform our entire civilization. And you would waste that gift on what? Gardening, on happiness," Zara said quietly, stepping to Orion's side. "On choice, on the revolutionary idea that children exist for their own sake, not as tools for someone else's ambitions." The cubs watched this adult confrontation with growing distress, their bioluminescence flickering through rapid color changes that indicated overwhelming emotion. Zara realized with growing horror that regardless of the outcome, this moment would shatter their peaceful world forever. "1 hour, Zara," Vex said, his voice carrying the finality of absolute authority. "Bring the children to the landing platform, or we'll come collect them ourselves, and the human." His smile held no warmth whatsoever. "We'll deal with his interference appropriately," as the military force withdrew to establish their perimeter, leaving the family alone with an impossible choice. Zara felt the weight of two worlds pressing down on her crystalline shoulders. Behind her lay the path of compliance safety for Orion, but a lifetime of regret for surrendering her children to a system that would value their abilities over their hearts. Ahead lay defiance, with all the dangerous uncertainty that choice would bring. The universe, it seemed, had decided to test whether love could truly transcend the boundaries of duty, species, and fear. The ancient heart grove revealed itself at dawn, like a secret the planet had been keeping for millennia, hidden deep within Verdania's core, accessible only through passages that seemed to shift and change according to the traveler's intent. It was a cathedral of living crystal that pulsed with the heartbeat of the world itself. Zara had discovered the entrance during their desperate flight from Vex's forces, following an instinct older than memory and stronger than fear. Now, as the first rays of Verdania's triple suns filtered through the grove's crystalline canopy, she stood with Orion and the cubs before the most remarkable being she had ever encountered. Elder Sage Whisperwind appeared to be composed of starlight and ancient wisdom, their form shifting between states of matter as if the concepts of solid and energy were merely suggestions they chose to follow. "So," the elder said, their voice resonating through dimensions Zara couldn't name, "the children of two worlds seek sanctuary in the place where all worlds meet." Whisperwind's attention settled on Kira and Nyx, who had fallen asleep against Orion's shoulders after their harrowing escape through the crystal caves, and they bring with them a question that echoes through the very foundations of creation. What makes a family? The grove around them hummed with responsive energy, and Zara realized that every plant, every crystal formation, every mote of light dancing through the air was alive and aware, witnesses to a conversation that would determine not just their fate, but the future of interspecies understanding itself. "Elder Whisperwind," Zara began, her voice trembling with exhaustion and hope, "we seek your guidance. The Etherian Defense Council claims authority over my children based on genetic heritage and military law, but love, choice, the bonds we've forged." She gestured helplessly at the small family they'd become. "Do these things matter to the universe?" Whisperwind smiled, an expression that seemed to encompass the warmth of every sun that had ever burned. "Child of crystals, the universe has been waiting eons for someone to ask that question with such perfect sincerity." The elder's attention turned to Orion, who had stirred at the sound of voices. "And you, child of distant Earth, what do you believe family to be?" Orion looked down at the cubs sleeping peacefully in his arms, then at Zara, her crystalline skin glowing with the soft, patterns that indicated deep emotional resonance. "I believe family is what you build together," he said simply, "not what you're born to, but what you choose to become. These children have taught me that love transcends species, transcends logic, transcends everything I thought I understood about connection." And yet, a new voice cut through the grove's harmony like a blade through silk. "Love without law becomes chaos, and chaos consumes civilizations." Captain Vex Ironhold emerged from the shadows at the grove's edge, his military escort spreading out in tactical formation. But as they crossed the threshold into the Heart Grove, something extraordinary happened. Their weapons powered down without command, their aggressive postures softened into wonder, and the hard edges of military discipline seemed to melt away like ice in warm sunlight. "The Grove welcomes all who come seeking truth," Elder Whisperwind observed mildly, "though it tends to reveal more truth than most visitors expect to find." Vex staggered slightly as the Grove's energy washed over him, his crystalline skin shifting through color patterns Zara hadn't seen since their early days together. Confusion, vulnerability, and underneath it all, a pain so deep it took her breath away. "I have legal authority," he said, but his voice had lost its commanding edge. "The children are Etherian citizens, protected bloodline descendants. They belong with their own people, do they?" Whisperwind asked gently. "Tell me, Captain Ironhold, when did you last hold your daughters? When did you last ask them what they dream about? What makes them laugh? What they fear in the darkness between stars?" Vex's expression cracked, revealing the grief he'd been carrying like armor. I've been protecting them, ensuring their future, their proper development, the responsibilities of bloodline heritage require." "Papa Vex." Nyx had awakened, her voice small and uncertain as she looked at her biological father. "Why are you sad? Your colors are all wrong." The question, delivered with a child's devastating honesty, seemed to shatter something in Vex's carefully constructed emotional barriers. He dropped to one knee, bringing himself to the cub's eye level, and for the first time in 3 years, Zara saw not the military officer but the man she had once loved. "I'm sad because I've forgotten how to be your father instead of your commander," he admitted, his voice breaking. "I convinced myself that duty was the same as love, that preparing you for greatness was more important than letting you be children." Kira scrambled down from Orion's arms and approached Vex with the fearless compassion that defined her young spirit. "But you can remember," she said earnestly. "Memory is just sleeping, like the starlight mosses. Sometimes it needs the right conditions to wake up." Elder Whisperwind's laughter was like wind chimes made of pure joy. "From the mouths of babes comes wisdom that eludes entire councils of learned beings." The elder's form shimmered, becoming more solid, more present. "Captain Ironhold, your children speak truth. The question before us is not who has legal claim to their lives, but who has earned the right to guide their hearts." "I have," Vex began, then stopped, the words dying in his throat as he really looked at his daughters, at their easy affection for Orion, their protective closeness to Zara, the way they moved like a family unit that had grown together through love rather than obligation. "We have," Orion said quietly, stepping forward to stand beside Zara. "All of us, together. These children don't need to choose between their heritage and their happiness. They need both. They need the strength of their Etherian legacy and the wonder of human curiosity. They need their mother's botanical wisdom and their father's protective love. They need a family that transcends the boundaries we've been taught to accept." Elder Whisperwind nodded approvingly. "The Grove has spoken through your hearts, and its verdict is clear. Love is not diminished by sharing, it multiplies. Family is not weakened by inclusion, it becomes stronger." The elder's attention encompassed all the adults present, but such a family requires courage from all its members. The courage to grow beyond old patterns, to choose connection over control, to build something unprecedented. Vex stood slowly, his crystalline features cycling through the color patterns of internal struggle. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of a man choosing to redefine everything he'd believed about duty and love. "Zara," he said formally, "I formally request permission to court your family, not to claim it, not to command it, but to earn a place within it." His gaze moved to Orion with something that might have been respect. And I ask the same of you, Orion Blackwood. Your bond with my daughters is undeniable, your care for them evident. Perhaps there's room for more than one father in their lives." The cubs' delighted squeals filled the grove as they launched themselves at both their parents, creating a tangle of arms and laughter that seemed to make the very crystals sing with joy. Zara felt tears of pure relief streaming down her face as Orion's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining like their lives had done. "The grove recognizes this union," Elder Whisperwind announced, their voice carrying the authority of natural law itself. "A family born not of biology alone, but of choice, love, and the courage to create something new. May it serve as a beacon for all who would build bridges between worlds." As the Heart Grove pulsed with celebratory light, Zara realized that they had done more than save their family. They had proven that love could indeed transcend every boundary the universe had tried to place between them. The cubs had two fathers who would learn to share the joy of guiding them, a mother whose fierce protection was matched only by her boundless love, and a home that existed not in any single place, but in the harmony they created together. The universe, it seemed, had been waiting all along for someone brave enough to redefine the very meaning of family itself. In the years that followed, their unusual household would become legendary across the galaxy, proof that the greatest adventures begin not with conquest or discovery, but with the simple, revolutionary act of choosing love over fear. And in the Heart Grove, where all worlds meet, the starlight mosses continued to sing their ancient songs of harmony, their luminous blooms a reminder that some bonds are stronger than law, deeper than blood, and more enduring than the stars themselves.